Welcome back. Well, you may have seen an earlier video where I got ChatGPT to design a calculator written in Python, and I kind of did it almost in real time, so it was a real fudge affair. I went back and changed things and so on. I thought I'd give it a bit more thought and see if I can come up with something quite decent. So this morning I had a look at it, and I come up with something that's much better than I had. And it's all in the prompt, as many people will tell you, and really how you define your question. Just like any problem, the computer has to really know what you want, otherwise it'll go ahead and do something silly, something you don't want. I mean, for example, I had the sign brackets X as the keys for the trig functions, and it got really confused with that because it was putting things within brackets and getting them wrong and not closing brackets. And I had a look at another calculator, my own calculator, and I realized that you just need sine, cos and tan. You don't need sine bracket X. So you put the number in, then you press sine. So I put the following prompt. Here are the design details of a calculator. It'll have the following buttons: clear, brackets, and so on. The numbers 0 to 9. Decimal point, I made sure about that because it missed it out, so I just thought make sure it's in. Pi, E, that's the Euler's number, 2.7182818, and a log 10 button. I didn't initially put log to the base E, but I changed that later. We need arithmetic operations, plus, minus, times and divide. Trig button, sine, cos, and that should be tan. But I put tans, I noticed by mistake, but it didn't. It obviously knew what that meant. Other buttons, 1 upon x, x squared, and degrees to radians buttons for the trig functions. Well, when I got the first version of that, what it did was it used it had a button for radians and degrees and so on, and it seemed to use that just as a conversion button. So if you typed a number into the calculator, it thought it was saying degrees and it converted it into radians, which is what I wasn't wanting. I wanted it to act as a means for the trig function, so that when I typed a number, it assumed it was in radians or degrees before I took the sign of that number. So I had to that's why it's explained here in more detail. Pressing the degrees radians button first means that the trig functions then operate in radians, so it's not actually a conversion thing. It is converting, but it's not converting on the display. And a small icon on the display should be displayed showing whether degrees or radians is selected. And there's a bit about the color, but I kind of changed that later. So let's see what it come up with. So it didn't come up with this initially. It would have taken me almost an hour of fiddling around, eventually finding the right explanation for it to get things working. And then when I got it working, it did work, but it had some problems, which I'll explain. So here's the code, which was written in Python, and I put it into PyCharm, just pasted it in. Here are the keys here, incidentally. I think this is a list it's called in Python. I believe it is. It's not an array. There is a slight difference between the two. I think it's a list. And you can change these, which is quite nice, and put a different arrangement, as I found out. So I don't claim to be an expert in this. I mean, it's fairly familiar code in the sense it's sort of object-oriented looking. And you can see the else if, it's similar to sort of C type things that you'd come across, or other languages. If then else's. There's a lot of logic in it that you'd have to figure out if you were doing this yourself. I mean, I guess you could use some kind of chart to go through this, like they used to in the old days, but I'm not sure everybody does that nowadays. But let's run it. And it actually gives a really nice display. I mean, it's quite aesthetically pleasing. I can't remember, I think I did say it needed to look good. So let's just try it. So say 3 times 4 equals 12. That works. Divide it by 5 is 2.4. The clear, that wasn't working, I think, to begin with. Sine, if I press sine, now it says error, but initially when I pressed sign, it crashed the whole program because there was no catch for it. You're going to need to define the errors that excluding the case where there's nothing being selected. So you need to tell it that, otherwise it's come up with an error. And same with cos and square root and so on. So take the square root of 4. Oh, let's take square, that's 16. Square root of, where's the square root? Oh, there it is, 4. Number, then the square root. I also put log 10. That's useful for working out dBs. So that should be log 10 of 1,000 should be 3, which it is. 1 upon x. Again, an error because I didn't enter anything. 0, an error. That's good. Let's put it's in radians. Let's put it in degrees and let's work out the sine in 90 degrees. That should be 1. So sine, and it's bang on 1. The previous one I did, but again had problems. I can go to radians. Let's pick pi, and then with the cos of pi should be -1, isn't it? There it is, -1. Go back to degrees, 45 degrees. The sine of 45 is 0.1 upon root 2, 0.707. Here's an interesting thing now, this problem that I've had a previous video on. If I do, let's say 4 divided by 2 times, let's see, 4 divided by 2 times 2. That's ambiguous mathematically, although most people take that to mean 4 divided by 2, then multiply by 2. So it would be 2 times 2, which is 4. It should give the answer, right? And it gives the answer as 4 because it does it left to right. That's just the default in the arithmetic. So I need to do, say, brackets 4. Oh, I don't really need brackets there. I can do 4 divided by, and then brackets 2 times 2. If I want it that other way. And it's given me an answer of 1. So the brackets are quite useful. It's got natural logarithms. So there's e. I take the log of that, which is 1. The only thing it hadn't got is x to the power y. And I put that in and I got it working. But when it put that in, some of the arithmetic functions stopped working. And I think that's because it was a bit harder to put x to the y, because you weren't just entering one number, you were entering a whole load of other things. So you had to enter x first and then press x to the y and then equals. And somehow that messed it up, but I'm sure that could be used. You can do multiple operations as well. 2 plus 3 divided by 2 should be 3.5, shouldn't it? Yeah, 3.5. So it's just like a normal calculator, and it's actually rather nice. Might actually use it, because the one I've got at the moment on Microsoft Scientific one stopped working for some reason. It's become corrupted and it won't work. So what we've got to learn from this is that you must be very clear with a prompt as to what you actually want, and you must also think about what errors might happen. Like in the case of the calculator, if it takes 1 upon x and x is 0, then you need to allow for that and catch that error. Obviously, I mean, these are usual programming things, but you can't expect the AI to put all your error correction rubbish in there. I mean, you have to tell it that this is what you want, because you haven't specified it. So probably the longer the prompt, the better. There was a case halfway through I was doing this when I asked it to rewrite the code, and I didn't say rewrite the code in Python, and so the damn thing rewrote it in HTML. So I mean, I could conceivably, I get this to run in other platforms quite easily by just giving it the code and telling it to rewrite it. But a word of warning, it won't necessarily work that easily. I tried it in Visual Basic, which is sort of same as C#, and it does actually run without errors, but the graphics was rubbish, so much so that the buttons were so small I couldn't even press them. You'd have to really put your own buttons in there, and pull them across as you would in Visual Studio, because it was creating some sort of text-based buttons, and the display, it was all out of proportion, the whole thing. So I couldn't quite get that to work. But in Python, everything seems to be straightforward, and I'm rather pleased with Python. I didn't realize it was quite so good and so easy to get things running. So I think I need to have a bigger look at Python and see what's possible with it. But there it is. So thank you very much. Any comments I'm quite happy to answer. Bye-bye.